Hey, everybody. I am so happy to be with you guys today. We're here live, and we have a really special guest. And it looks like I'm a little frozen. I hope that's not the case um, with everybody seeing me. I hope you guys can see me just fine. Let's see here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on Ian, and let's see what he sees.
Morning, Rob. Morning, everybody. You are freezing.
Yeah. Okay. So how about we do this? I'll be right back, and we will. Okay. Yeah, I'm very delayed. Okay. Well, it's bound to happen at some point. I'll be right back on.
Well, I was about to say to Rob, everybody, that it didn't matter that much. We can hear his voice just fine. But as he said, we're going to talk to Rachel Fusaro this morning, and I had the great privilege of talking to her back in Nashville 2 or 3 years ago. Rachel and I had some good talks about keto, dog health, dog food. That was the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association conference that we were at a beautiful venue in Nashville, and we had a lovely time. We even went to see Elvis's mansion there. But Rachel was very kindly interviewed me back then, and this morning we have the great privilege of talking to her. And Rob, there you are back again. I was just saying it. Your voice is coming across just fine, so that's the important point. We can hear what you've got to say.
Oh, good. Good. Well, what we're going to do is I'll bring Rachel on, and then I'm going to go back off and probably restart my machine, and then we'll let you guys get the conversation started, and we'll see if that remedy's things. So, without any further ado, let's welcome Rachel Fusaro.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, Rachel. It was
Good to see
great
you.
meeting you back at Nashville, and even better this morning. Well, no, it's no better this morning. It was better back at Nashville, but great to see you. Good to talk with you.
You as well. I'll never forget sitting in your conference room, and it was standing room, all the veterinarians standing there watching you speak, and everyone was just laser focused and excited to hear what you had to say. And that was really memorable for me. So I'm excited to connect again.
It was great to be able to talk about, not so great to talk about cancer because of what it is, but it was good to talk about the new look at the way we should look at cancer as a metabolic disease rather than just as a straight genetic disease, something that we can treat metabolically with food, and particularly the keto diet. So that's a really important thing, that we understand that cancer is not just a death sentence via genetics, and actually not just a death sentence via chemo and radio. We don't have to take out the patient along with the treatment. We can actually treat it more as just a chronic disease. But this morning we're not here to talk particularly about cancer, more about other things, and particularly talking about your work and focusing on you, which is you have a huge influence out there, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I've been I'm what I call a researched pet parent or a professional dog mom over here. But my background, just to introduce myself briefly, is I have my bachelor's degree in nutrition science, albeit in human. So I always say I'm a human nutritionist turned professional dog mom, if you will, and kind of took what I learned there into the canine world and really learned of the multiple synergies between human and canine, and that passion around metabolic health, that passion around anatomy and physiology, chemistry, translates really well into the canine world, and has been a really exciting way for me to share my learnings from people like yourself, Dr. B. And I know we're not talking about cancer, but I have your book here that I love. And I love taking learnings that I've gained from people much smarter than myself, and sharing it in really relatable pieces of content on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok for pet parents. And what I kind of always tell my community is that you come to my platforms curious, you come curious, and then you stay informed. And together we really digest pet news, pet health, pet science, and it's been a really, really great journey so far.
Oh, well done. I
Thank you.
looked at you on Instagram and saw, wow, this lady is, yeah, you are the ultimate pet mum. You just love you just love your dogs. And I thought, Mr. Fusaro, if I can
I
call
know.
you that.
Yes. I know many people ask, is my husband as into dogs as I am? And it's funny because his passions are very separate. He loves our pets, but he's not into that world in the same way I am. So I love being able to take concepts I learn and then teach him, and then he'll give me feedback from somebody who's not necessarily as well versed in nutrition science, for example, and helps me make it more digestible for my audience.
So he's a great sounding board for your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
I
it's a
think
lot of fun.
he's also second fiddle to the dogs in your life.
Yeah, the honest truth is that my dogs are, and everyone knows it, my dogs are pretty much my priority in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, I love my family and friends, of course, but I mean, my dogs, I mean, they're my purpose. They're my passion. They're my center. And they're where I spend my energy and time for the most part. And now, this is what I do full time, which is a blessing all in itself. So they've really opened up a lot of doors for me.
Yes. And you're opening up a lot of doors for people out there in their knowledge, which is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not a canine certified nutritionist. I've thought about going down that road, but I kind of like having that point of separation and leaning on experts like yourself to really give that niche information. And I'm not even a certified trained dog trainer, but those are all of the content pieces I share. And I think people really resonate with it because I come from the lens of an everyday dog mom, like from one dog mom to the next. This is, how I take care of my dogs. This is how I train my dogs. And I try to come from a non-polarizing lens and more of a, hey, these are the things that work for me, and here's some resources for you to go learn more and hopefully apply what works best for your pet.
I think that's fabulous. We really do need to look at every angle on every subject and learn from everybody we possibly can. In fact, when I was a student, one of our teachers, and he was actually an American, he was Professor Kirk, he told us that our clients would be and our patients would be our best teachers. And he was so right. Just by listening to what they had to tell you, very important. So very important for vets to listen to what their clients have to say about their dogs, because pet mums are the people who really know their dogs. And so I think I always admire mothers because they are the most wonderful people on earth, whether they're human for human kids or for the fur babies, because their caring is just absolute. Rob, you're back.
Oh, we just lost him again. Yeah, that's a really good point. I'd like to talk a little bit about, because one of the most common questions or concerns I get from my community is that they'll follow my videos that talk about at least adding fresh food to the bowl, if not feeding an entirely fresh food diet. But then when they share that with their veterinarian, they get a lot of pushback. And, I get a lot of polarizing messages and emails about that saying, you know, I'm really angry with my vet, or I can't believe my vet would recommend Royal Canin. And the way I try to approach it, but I'd love your feedback because I mean, you're a veterinarian and I know you're experienced in this specifically, is, exactly what you said, to work with your vet, to share your concerns without judgment with your vet, to share resources. like your book, for example, or other ones like it with their vet to help educate and and to have an open mind, but also to be confident as the pet parent or pet owner to seek second opinions. I get a lot of people saying, I tried sharing all of this with my vet and they don't even want to see me as a client anymore, or they don't even want to talk about that aspect of feeding a raw food or fresh food diet with my dog or not over vaccinating. And, I tell them, try to approach it with respect, but always feel confident to seek second and even third opinions and looking for integrative or holistic veterinarians as part of building a care team. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. Definitely seeking a second opinion, no question about that. But the other thing is, you said, with respect, talk to your vet. And I think now, I used to tell people, look, you can't blame your vet because this is
Yeah.
the way your vet was trained. Hello, Rob, you're back. Good to see.
Yay.
Yeah, well, I think
We don't actually need you, Rob. You can go home if you like.
I know.
I'm kidding.
I can hear you. It's just I think we're having an internet problem here. So, but I'm hearing your conversation and I'm loving it. So, what I'll probably do is I'll pop off and let you guys go at it. Try to do my best to get back on soon.
Rob, stay
no worries.
there. I think you should stay because we lost your voice.
Yep. Oh, he's gone.
All right.
That's fine.
Now,
Technology.
technology, yes. Well, we are at different parts of the world. I think it's just amazing that we can chat and that there are
Yes.
people out there listening. It's all incredible. I used to happen to travel for days and months on planes in cramped conditions to do this sort of thing. Now I can just be at home. But look, talking to your vet, most important, I used to say, don't blame your vet because this is the way your vet was trained. But most vets now have to be aware that so many people out there are not feeding what I called a poison chalice, this PC, politically correct food, but it's actually a poison chalice, it is absolutely shocking. And as a trained biologist, that vets should accept what they've been taught by the pet food companies as they mature as a veterinarian in their life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is absolutely terrible. So, with respect, I say to people now, you have to challenge a bit. And I like your word confident. They have to be confident in what they're doing, that what they're doing is right, and that their vet is actually wrong when it comes to nutrition in recommending the PC food. That they are wrong. And even if you're leaving your vet, you should say, I believe you should say, well, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to find a vet who will accept proper food for dogs. But I want you, in the meantime, to think about it because you are recommending something equivalent to feeding a fast food to our dogs, which is based on carbohydrates, which is cooked to death, which bears no relevance to what they were designed by evolution to eat. And you actually should be ashamed to recommend that. And I say that with respect because you are a thinking, intelligent person. But I have to leave you.
What would you say to if a client came to you, that couldn't see you as a vet, of course, and their veterinarian told them that, well, we recommend kibble because dogs evolved to be able to digest kibble, or we recommend, this science diet food because there's been so much research behind it. What are some things that we could tell clients or pet parents to help them combat that, and not in a combative way, but just to kind of be able to speak to it?
The only research that's ever been done is to compare one terrible food with another terrible food.
I love it. Yeah.
They've never compared good food, real food, with this terrible food. So the science is all been all about how do we turn something that is absolutely inappropriate to feed to our dogs into something that doesn't appear to cause damage in the short term, but in the long term actually causes damage. And the problem is it's never the damage it causes because it's so long term is never linked to the cause. And we just assume, which makes an ass out of you and me, We
Yep.
assume that it's old age, that this is an age. And yes, it's not old age in chronological terms. What we're talking about here is aging as caused by the food. And in this case, aging means deterioration. And this food is causing the body to deteriorate. And then I give a very simple analogy. Would you put in your brand new sparkling car that you paid $100,000 for crappy spare parts, the wrong fuel, poor quality fuel, poor quality lubricants? No, you wouldn't. You put in the manufacturer's recommended spare parts, because you know that if you put the wrong stuff in, your car will break down. Now, your dog breaks down for exactly the same reason. You're putting in the wrong fuel. Metabolically, it's atrocious to feed them all these carbohydrates. And that brings me back to another point. And I know, in answer to your question, this whole point of dogs having evolved now to eat more carbohydrates, that has not changed their metabolic ability to deal with it. In fact, the very fact that they now produce more amylase to digest carbohydrates means that they are able to take more poison into their body than they could before. So this actually is worse. You're saying now the dog has evolved an ability to take in more poison and be more damaged because of the increased amylase. So this is not a good thing, and it doesn't indicate the dog has evolved in a good way. It simply means that those dogs that could readily eat this food, they reproduce first, because the inflammation, the damage caused by these high blood sugar levels occurs over a long period of time. So those animals evolved on the high carbohydrate diets. They produce more pups. So those pups had the ability to take this in. And now we have a whole group of dogs today that can take in carbohydrates readily, raise their blood sugar readily, raise their insulin readily. And those two things, the blood sugar with glycated end products and all that, and the high insulin produces inflammation, drives all these diseases. And we have this wonderful business model where the veterinary profession absolutely tells people they must feed this poisoned food, and has the ability then to diagnose the problems that come up with it. They get applauded for it. They sell it. It's a perfect business model. It's the most disastrous thing.
It is, and that's how I kind of describe these kind of big conglomerate pet food companies. You have the Mars and the Royal Canin, and is that they are the most brilliant marketers of all time, because that, in my opinion, is what they've done. They've really infiltrated into the most influential humans in our pet health, which are veterinarians, into these vet schools. And I don't mean all vet schools, which I know you're familiar with, but many are highly influenced by these big pet food companies, where their priority clearly is bottom line, margin, revenues. And I think for me, in the content I share is less about demonizing that, although that does get me really heated, but it's more about just making pet parents aware. Like, yes, you may have veterinarians or vet techs or other health professionals really recommending these ultra processed kibbles. And I know it's hard to kind of go against that, and I know this is a common saying, but it's like, really, in the veterinarian professionals, the only health professional that's constantly recommending an ultra processed food for the dog's entire life. If you think about, or their client's entire life. I mean, with humans, imagine if our primary care physician was to recommend we eat fortified cereal forever because it has all the nutrients needed. I mean, that's a little ludicrous. So that's really my goal, is like to try to change that frame of mind, because once you can kind of get away from that, just kind of following what somebody of authority has and thinking on our own, that's when I think we can really push for change as pet parents in kind of voting with what we purchase with our dollar.
You have to empower the pet parents with true knowledge. That's what it's about. Yeah. This and it's not a conspiracy theory either, in the sense that the vets aren't conspiring together in this.
No.
In a sense, they are brought up to be ignorant of actual nutrition for pets. And so I guess I believe that even the people who work for the pet food companies, the vast majority of them actually believe in what they're doing.
Yes.
And all of this is a huge problem, because so we need to educate, the world needs to be educated. And I guess and I've told people for years, the only way we can do this is for pet parents to go in and say to their vet, look, this is my dog. This is my dog. He's 12 years old. He doesn't have cancer. He's not arthritic, etc., etc. He's fed raw all his life. You have to look at this dog. You have to take it. And it's not just, don't just knock this off as an anecdotal story, because yes, 1 or 2, maybe 10 dogs is anecdotal, but thousands of dogs experiencing this is epidemiology. It's a population of animals that are now experiencing these benefits. And the veterinary profession has to look. And
I agree.
yeah.
When I had it's interesting. Long story short, I made a video about this, and I had a lot of conventional veterinarians reply and be really unhappy about it. But I had one specifically who was really heated and said, Royal Canin can save dogs' lives. Like fresh, raw dog food is unhealthy and unsafe. And I shared some articles, and I shared your content, and I shared a lot of stuff with this vet. And she's now kind of flipped the coin, and now she's creating content about fresh foods. And this was over a 6-month period. And so, but one thing she said she had to do in vet school, this was a little while ago, was she had to answer, in order for her to pass an exam in her nutrition class, she had to write down, I want to get your thoughts on this. She had to write down that when it comes to pet food, the ingredients don't matter. It's just the nutrients in those ingredients. And she had a really hard time wrapping her head around that. And I've had a vet tech since then tell me the same thing they had to do. That.
Yes. And I've been speaking very much to this point, that we feed our dogs food, not nutrients. And if we feed the food they're designed to eat, the nutrients just naturally follow. So our thinking must be food-centered, not nutrient-centered. Because if you feed what a dog is designed to eat, then naturally the nutrients are going to be there. There's been nobody out there teaching dogs to eat nutrients, no matter what form they come in. That's just, and the very important thing is this: how does it work? It works because there are the homeostatic mechanisms that have been honed by literally millions of years of evolution are designed to work with real food. They're not designed to work with nutrients that have been incorporated into some base of carbohydrates or some energy format. So it's homeostasis that we're depending upon, and those cybernetic mechanisms, the relationship between food, the genetics of the dog, and the pathways, the complicated pathways, the feedback mechanisms, the safety loops, all those things, they work with real food. And that means also that dogs do not require an Excel spreadsheet and a computer to have their diet worked out for them. That's not the way it works. The Excel spreadsheet and that computer is actually fully incorporated into the DNA of that dog. And we now call it epigenetics and nutrigenomics and all these wonderful new words, but it's always been there, that the dog's body works together with real food to take what nutrients it requires in the form that it requires, and that promotes health. And the balance is actually achieved so long as you approximate what that dog was designed to eat. You don't have to look to nutrients as such. The whole nutrient thing grew out of things like beriberi and all these early experiences we had with vitamins, where we saw that there were deficiencies causing terrible diseases. And so nutrition as a science is really focused on deficiency and feeding just enough to overcome deficiency, and making sure that the nutrients we know about are present. And I make the point, when you feed real food, you feed the nutrients we know about, the nutrients we don't know about, and the nutrients we don't yet know as essential. And it just happens. And the people who have the greatest difficulty getting their head around this are the professional nutritionists. And if they've got a PhD in nutrition, it's almost impossible to get this concept through to them because they cannot see it.
Yeah. And so really what you're saying is so beautifully well said, Dr. B. I can't wait for you to continue making content like this. I think you're going to continue to make a huge impression on the world. But I think what you're saying is, you know, when we're thinking about feeding our dogs, it's less about making it a science project, and it's more about feeding them a variety of foods, and
Yes.
that it's less about just feeding a nutrient. And by doing this and having a more holistic look into the way we feed them, the foods become more, or the nutrients become more bioavailable from the foods versus trying to give a vitamin here or a mineral there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, and we've got to be careful this word bio. Well, yes, they're correctly bioavailable.
Got
We're
it.
not increasing their availability. We are giving them by feeding them food, the nutrients arrive in the form that the dog's body can select what it needs, reject what it doesn't need, and they become appropriately bioavailable. And that's the important point. It's appropriateness. And I made that point in relation to this amylase, the increased amylase we now detect in dogs today because they've been raised for generations on high carbohydrate diets. So there's been a selection for the ability to digest carbohydrates by increasing amylase. So that doesn't necessarily augur good for the dog. What is good for the dog is that the food's presented as the type of food it's always eaten that actually conforms to its needs. And that way, homeostasis makes sure from real food that it takes what nutrients it requires, even if those nutrients are under, say, AFCO or NRC or FEDIAF levels, but it will still take what it needs and not show signs of deficiency. And if there's too much there, as long as it's in real food form, in the context of a whole diet based on evolutionary normalities, it will always take what it needs. That's the way it works. Otherwise, we would have had problems with, well, there have been problems, but all those problems have been ironed out by evolution. And we call
Yeah.
it. Yes.
And is this why sometimes you see dogs, because I get this question a lot, you'll see some dogs where they'll live to like 19 years old and they didn't necessarily eat a traditional complete and balanced diet in the way that we look at it, is because that dog biologically was able to get the appropriate nutrients and minerals from the foods it was given, from the appropriate bioavailability, a concept you spoke about. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is exactly right. And I saw, and you know, in my younger days when I was dealing with a lot of dogs in the country, that's in the bush of Australia, I would have dogs come in, though 19, 20 years old, and there would be this young family, and you know, the kids would be 18, 19, 20 themselves, absolutely bawling their eyes out. And I was crying at the end because this dog had been with them all their life. But this dog had just eaten their food, they were off a farm, so had eaten raw food. It had gone out in the paddock and eaten sheep poop and cow poop and horse poop. And it had lived a life of running around in the open air, touching the earth, doing all these wonderful things. Nobody gave it a second thought. It had never been to see a vet. But now suddenly it's reached its use-by date, the time when all its biological clocks were shutting down, not because it had aged, but by being fed bad food, but because simply it had aged chronologically and it was time for it to go. And this is the way we should all end up. But we don't, including myself, because we tend to eat foods that we might enjoy and that aren't good for us. In my case, it's anyway, I won't go to that. But
no, well, that's an interesting point too, because I'll do like a dog treat review where I'll compare a treat that's full of wheat, sugar, dyes versus like a single ingredient meat treat, right? And people are like, well, but these are treats. They're meant to feed, occasionally, just once in a while. But to your point of us as humans, we have the curse and the blessing to be able to eat what we want when we want, so we can give into the cravings. But with my dogs, I'm not saying they eat perfect every time or all the time, but with our dogs, we are their advocate for what they eat, and they don't they're happy, they're just happy eating a little chicken heart versus, you know, a wheat sugar filled treat. So might as well just give them the benefit of the doubt. So your comment on that really kind of made me think of that.
Yes, well, we are in control of them and their eating habits, so we can do, and they're going to enjoy it anyway. They're going to enjoy real food anyway. And
Yeah,
I'm sure,
exactly.
well, you can be sure they don't enjoy if they're eating constant treats that are based on sugar and all sorts of chemicals and what have you. That is going to upset their microbiome. It's going to affect their mentality. It's going to affect every aspect of their health, just as it does for us. And as they get older, it will affect it more and more. And if I can use bad English, worse and worse. So things are just going to accelerate as they get older. And yeah, let's not do that to our dogs. We don't have to. But having said that, a little bit of what they fancy now and again, gosh, that doesn't do them any harm either, because their body
Exactly.
can cope with the occasional thing as long as it doesn't become habitual and then gradually increase. But your point that you've seen dogs, and we all have, that have never eaten what might be described as a perfect diet, but most of the time they were eating real food. And it
Yep.
was never perfectly balanced. It certainly wasn't balanced at every meal. That's absolutely not necessary. As long as the entire diet over time contains the things that they require, and that's real food, which, just like you and me, they're absolutely fine. And I noticed
So
early on those dogs just didn't get cancer till late in life, for example, or arthritis. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old dog now. She's a cocker spaniel crossed with a cavalier. She's got no arthritis and she runs like a spring chicken. But
beautiful.
she just doesn't get processed pet food. She gets real food, and
Yeah.
I never measure it out in any particular way. But I know she gets lots of raw meaty bones, and she gets some organ meat, and so on and so forth. And she gets a bit of our food, and she's just a happy, healthy dog. And it's so simple. This is my message. And I
Okay.
hope, and I'm sure you're giving the same message, that it is simple. It's not complex.
Yes. Well, it is, and this is a really interesting topic that you bring up on this complete imbalance. And I've heard you say this before, that we're overcomplicating it. And something that I actually don't talk about a lot because it is so controversial, but this is a safe space, I think, is when I think about human nutrition, we were never taught to have every meal when we sit down to be complete and balanced. And like that's never a conversation. And then I have uh, registered dietitian and nutritionist friends that have children, and I ask them, are you making sure that your child's meal, every meal they have, breakfast, lunch, dinner, is every single one complete and balanced? And a human child, I'm saying, not dogs. And they look at
Yes,
me
yes.
like, what do you mean? No, I just make sure, throughout the day they get some fruits. And then I start thinking, or, for the past few years, thinking, then why is there's this heavy emphasis on complete and balanced in the pet food space? And like, this is like a huge term on every bag and everybody's asking about it. And it feels like, and I might get a little shame from this from some of my colleagues, but it feels like it's a little bit of a marketing term, because I feel like there's so many different definitions of what complete and balanced is. And I feel like that term is really turning away a lot of pet parents. And caveat, I'm not condoning feeding a non-complete and balanced meal. I'm just kind of curious about this topic. And I know you've spoken about it before. I'd love more of your thoughts. It's a sensitive
Well,
one, I know.
your introduction of human parents and their human children is absolutely correct, and it completely applies to the dog world. The dogs are not suddenly different. All of this complete and balance arises out of the commercial necessity to sell a product that is complete and balanced. But I also make the point in my lectures, just as we now know that periods of fasting, so not eating at all, are important, and that we don't have to eat 3 meals a day, and we can shorten the interval where we do eat, and our dogs are the same. And the dogs are different anyway, in that they in fact can often do better on 1 meal a day rather than 2. But having said all that, I actually believe that if dogs evolved, and this is important, if dogs evolved to eat a diet that was never complete and balanced, that must confer benefits. In other words, attempting to feed a dog a complete and balanced diet at every meal probably is deleterious to their health, amongst other things, quite apart from the high carbohydrate levels and the cooked and the inflammation and so on. So this is just another, and my point is very much this, and it's based on a fellow called Theodosius Dobzhansky. Have you heard of Theodosius Dobzhansky?
I haven't. I'm excited to learn.
He's a Russian, or he was, he's deceased now, but he was a Russian, in fact, he was a Ukrainian-born geneticist, and he migrated to America. He had an enormous influence in the 1930s on the way we think of evolution. And his best and most famous and important quote, and I didn't learn about this till probably in the last 10 years, he said this, and so it resonated completely with the way I'd been thinking for a long time. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. In other words, whatever we have evolved to be, evolution has designed us this way. So it all goes back to that car analogy. It's design. So we are not designed to have every meal complete and balanced. So the commercial paradigm is actually just another feature that's working against our dogs.
That's interesting, and it kind of makes sense, because if you really step back and think about, obviously dogs and humans are different, but there's a lot of synergies, as we talked about before. And I know I said this earlier, but I've never thought about, oh, is my meal, or even is my entire day's worth of food for me, is it complete and balanced? And
Correct.
No, and like I have extensive nutrition training, and that's not something that's ever really considered. To your point, it's always been about the upper toxic levels or deficiencies, of course. And so that's really interesting to me, but there still is a really big, heavy push around making sure food is complete and balanced within even holistic veterinarians or even within pet parents. So I do think that there's a little bit of a divide there, but I'm leaning definitely towards kind of your thoughts that we kind of overcomplicate it. And especially because I think there maybe have been situations where, like I had one veterinarian say that they didn't like when pet parents said they fed a raw diet, because in their experience, that meant that the pet parent was going to buy some ground beef from the grocery store, throw an egg on it, and call it good. So I think that there are definitely extremes, right? That clearly wouldn't have everything the dog would need, like the bone.
Let's get back to this. When I was a student, we were taught an all-fish diet will lack thiamine, and so it will cause a brain problem, encephalomalacia, or I can't even remember the names of the terms now. An all-liver diet will cause a vitamin A excess, and cats will train you to feed them this. Mind you, in my experience, it takes about 5 years for this to develop, but they've developed cervical, that is in the neck, on their neck spine, cervical exostoses, bony growths, which then join together, and the cat sits up like a kangaroo and can't move. But it takes years for this to happen. The oily fish was a lack of vitamin E. They got pancreatitis, which is all their fat became inflamed and sore. Now, so there was these limited number. The all meat diet caused secondary hyperparathyroidism, where it just leached all the calcium out of the bones. So there were these very few simple things that you could do, and the all fish diet came from feeding, I think it was minks on fish somewhere, and so on. So these were very extreme diets, and the all meat diet was common, as people think that might be a natural diet. And the bone, by the way, the bone solved that very quickly. But I recognized that there were these very few simple diseases of deficiency that were very obvious, easy to diagnose, easy to treat by changing the diet very simply. And we replaced these with a raft, enormous number of degenerative diseases that are complex in their etiology, they're complex to diagnose, they're complex to treat. So what we did by going to this complete and balanced diet was exchanging a few simple diseases of excess and deficiency with an enormous range of diseases that were complex. And epidemiologically speaking, the evidence for this was very obvious. When I was a student in the 1970s, we were told we don't see in Australia all the diseases that we see in America. And I felt as a young vet, oh, how deficient am I going to be because we don't get to see these diseases? And I didn't figure it out then, but it didn't take long once I was in practice. The reason being because we didn't feed the crappy, politically correct food in Australia. Most of the food we fed was raw. They didn't get periodontal disease because they ate lots of bones. They didn't get all these diseases. Cancer was a rarity. We didn't see any of these orthopedic diseases, hip dysplasia, elbow dysplasia, all that stuff was a rarity too. But it all changed when we started to import processed pet food and started to take this on this paradigm of complete and balanced food in this commercial form. So epidemiologically, we have seen a shift in Australia, and this was actually recorded at a conference. And I won't go into that details now, but it was presented to us by a fellow, Professor Rick Reed, who went through it with me. But he didn't even see it himself. He presented it, but he didn't understand the rationale behind it. Yeah. And I'm still amazed that whole story. We have created this poison chalice of complete and balanced food. It's all based on commercial necessity. It's got nothing to do with biological necessity, and we are causing these problems. And it's all wrong.
Yeah, and and this conversation right here is why I believe, or one of the big reasons I think I've grown the following that I have, because pet parents, it's so interesting to me, even, thinking about 10 years ago when I first started, well, probably 7, 8, 10 years ago, first started creating content around dogs to now, the pet parent seems more researched and more educated and more eager to learn about this than ever before. But at the same time, they seem to be more overwhelmed than ever before. And I think this conversation is a good example of that because, in my opinion, it goes back to these big pet food companies that are what I call marketing, brilliant marketers that are spending billions of dollars to convince veterinarians and pet parents that we need to have complete and balanced diets in a specific way, and we need to feed a high carb diet, etc. So it's a really almost, it feels like an impossible place for a pet parent to be. But like, if somebody was watching this, and I know you're asked this a lot, but I plan to use some of this and share a lot of this. Like, if you had a pet parent that's like, they know that feeding a kibble today is not optimal, but they're terrified to do anything else because their vets have condemned them. Like, what's a good first step that you would say for someone in those shoes?
Raw meaty bones, chicken wings and necks is a great place to start. We've talked about human mums feeding their kids.
Yes.
Basically, you're following some sort of pyramid. So at the bottom of your pyramid, you've got certain foods that form the basis of the diet. Then you go up and up. Now, for dogs, very simple. At the bottom of a dog pyramid is raw meaty bones. And without going into why that's so. The next two, so around about 60%, I've always recommended this, and this suits all ages. You can drop that percentage later on if you want to, but even so. Then the next 15% lots are vegetables ground up, so they're like the gut contents of an animal. And the next lot is offal. So in other words, internal organs. And I don't care whether you call them secreting organs or anything else, but kidney, liver, and heart, or liver, kidney, and heart, they're the three vital ones. But you can add anything else that's there, eyeballs, heads, brains, whatever. That can all go into that mix. And then on top of that is poo. And that's about 10%.
Yes. I've not heard anybody say that. So
raw meaty bones, crushed veggies in season, raw, absolutely crushed, so they're broken down, internal organs, and then poo. Now, the poo bit. Poo, I noticed very early on that dogs were coprophagic. That is the scientific knowledge. They like to eat poo, whether it's their own, whether it's little dogs love the cat litter box, marvelous camembert cheese, blue vein cheese for them. What does it do? Well, it's bacterial bodies. Bacteria are living creatures. Bacteria are full of vitamins. They're full of essential fatty acids. They're full of top quality protein. If it's from a herbivore like a horse or a cow or whatever, it's also got all this wonderful fiber in it. So that's prebiotic. And of course, it's got probiotics in it. And that's something we don't feed enough of. And that's where I'm involved now with, where are we? Gussie's gut,
Gussie guts. Yeah.
making a probiotic food, which is fermented vegetables, and a few other things like cheese, which is also fermented food, by the way. And dogs actually require fermented food. And it was always part, I tried to pop it in my recommendations with a bit of kefir or yogurt or whatever, sauerkraut, but some dogs don't like all those things. And some dogs have allergies to dairy, so fermented veggies is great. But basically the 10% is poo. So we use poo substitutes. So essential fatty acids, so fish oil is great. Extra protein, eggs are wonderful. First quality protein. What else? Well, the vegetables themselves are the probiotics and prebiotics. And we throw in kelp and alfalfa because both of these, alfalfa sends down roots deep into the soil, about 40 feet, picks up all the minerals that haven't been leached out. And the trace minerals are very important things. And these are part of the things that we don't know about or don't understand or why they're important. I've seen some papers on this, but that's another story. The kelp from the sea has got all the minerals washed into the sea. And so, again, just look at simple poo substitutes and feed to your dog in that way and base it on raw meaty bones, because the raw meaty bone itself is almost a complete diet. And pretty well most of the time is a complete diet. And the other thing is dogs are scavengers. And those scavengers, they eat poo, they're coprophagic, but they eat lots of bones. So the very simple approach that you take is actually doing a very complicated job, working together with the cybernetic mechanisms that are generated by the dog's DNA deep in its genome to produce health. And it's so simple. It's simple in what you do. It's complex in its understanding. And so it's actually so complex in its understanding, we will never understand it. I don't believe. Well, certainly not in my lifetime or possibly even in yours, which will be very long because you eat health.
Yeah, I say that frequently, is that there's even in human nutrition, there's so much that we don't know. So part of it is, to your initial point earlier on, is as the dog owner or pet parent, it's partly on us to be somewhat intuitive and knowing our dogs, knowing how they respond to foods and respond to different diets. And it's interesting you say poo is part of the pyramid, if you will, because my Labrador, he just turned 13, still doing great, like tiny bit. When we do hikes at the beach, after the next day, he's a little sore, but after that, he's totally fine. No one realizes he's 13, but he ate processed kibble until about 4 or 5 years old before I learned. And it wasn't until I was feeding him a raw diet, raw meaty bones, that he started eating his own poop. And now we can barely keep him away from it. And I think it's a lot of what you said. Like he loves it. He loves getting, I don't know, his nutrients from it. And so it's interesting that you say that.
Well, good quality vitamin K and B complex. The other thing about, I can just go back to your point, we don't know about nutrition. When I first started recommending raw meaty bones, it was based on a simple observation. And this actually came back to Professor Kirk, who told us to ask our clients what they fed the dogs. And I noticed that all the dogs that were healthy, they just fed lots of raw meaty bones. I said, okay. I started to analyze why, and I could see that it was to do with the balance of calcium and phosphorus. That's the only way to achieve it properly, although you can do it with veggies too. That's another story. But I said, we're going to work out over time why it is that the bone is so important. And I didn't know back then, but I since learned, for example, that the cartilage in bone, apart from providing the elements for the dog's own joints, is also anti-cancer. And it's anti-cancer because it's anti-angiogenic. And angiogenesis is the process by which a cancer forms a blood supply. And if a cancer cannot form a blood supply, it cannot grow. So dogs that ate lots of raw meaty bones that were full of cartilage were actually eating a very anti-cancer diet. Now, they're trying to make anti-angiogenic chemicals in the laboratory and feed them to people to stop because they understand this. But those things have numerous side effects. And guess what?
Really?
Cartilage doesn't. But it's
interesting.
You can't patent cartilage. So nobody wants, it's there. It's in the food. So when you have your Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever, eat the ends off the bones of the cartilage. Everybody should be doing this. I do it. because we all have cancer in us. It's there.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's in micro form. And if it can't get beyond that micro form, it will never do any harm.
Yeah.
So
That's
there is so much
that's
that
an
we don't know.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's hard to talk about, and I know we're getting close to time, but I do would like a 30-second response from you on, because I love feeding raw meaty bones and I love recommending them for dental health, but also to people who are just, as you said, starting to add fresh foods. Because one comment I get is when they start eating or feeding a raw food, they get a little bit of the GI upset, which is normal because they're adding real bacteria in their diet. But I love raw meaty bones because that bulks up the poo, so they usually have less of that. But
yes,
sometimes I get the comments, well, my dog's going to get salmonella, or, you know, bones are going to cause a perforation, which I always say, right, that dog's system are able to handle the potential salmonella. And if anything, it's more of a concern for you and I just wash my hands like I would preparing meat for my family. And when it comes to, you know, getting a perforation on with a chicken bone, as long as it's raw, it's typically softer, spongier. They can crunch it down. And if you're worried, you can hold it to kind of teach them to chew. But what are some of your kind of feedback on that to help others?
yeah. The bone, that's the best way to start a dog, particularly if they have GI issues. If you start a dog on that, they will very rarely get GI issues. Just on raw meaty bones, chicken necks, chicken wings, very, very important. There was something else that I wanted to say. Oh, yes. You mentioned bacteria. Yes, they're covered. Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, whatever, Campylobacter. They're all there. We are, our cells, they're called eukaryotic as opposed to prokaryotic. Bacteria are prokaryotic. Very early in the evolution of life on Earth, there were these very simple cells, bacteria, and things called archaea. We are formed from a combination of a bacteria and an archaea. The bacteria formed our mitochondria, which is the organ that, or sorry, the organelle that gives us energy. But the point is this: we are part bacteria, and we have lived as organisms with bacteria. So, and we have developed an immune system. Now, our immune system is not there to fight the bacteria. It is there to live in harmony with the bacteria. It's important that our dogs receive Salmonella, E. coli, Campylobacter in their food in small doses, along with all the other, what they call saprophytes, the bacteria that are just normally there that are non-pathogenic. So the immune system looks at this whole group of bacteria and says, Salmonella, I'll just keep you a little bit in check, that's fine. Same with Campylobacter and Listeria and E. coli. This other mob over here, this group of bacteria that's going to break down the probiotics, the cellulose, and turn it into short-chain fatty acids, which then feeds the bowel. Oh, well, we'll let you grow a bit more. And so our dog is designed, as we are, our whole gut is designed to work together with these bacteria that live there, the microbiome, put in there with whether it's fermented food or just naturally occurring on the food that's eaten. So important not to sterilize the food for your dog. My God. Anyway, so it's there, and our immune system is there not to fight it, but to live in harmony with it. And if one of them becomes a bit obstreperous and starts to rise, the immune system says, hey, settle down, go back down, just occupy your little niche in there, because we don't know that even Salmonella is doing a job referring to our health. We don't know that. If it's there and the dog's body is working with it, then there has to be a reason. Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So it's there for a reason. We don't have to understand it, but we have to work with it and let it happen. So, and we have to stop stressing out.
And not living in fear, I think, is kind of
Not
what
living in
you're
fear.
saying,
Yes.
right? And what following what is common sense is how I would look at it when it comes to our dogs, and that's
Absolutely.
incredible.
Well, I have a simple set of pictures I put up for this, and I show a dog licking its own backside, licking another
Yeah,
dog's backside, licking
yeah.
its penis or whatever, drinking out of a toilet bowl, scavenging in a garbage can. That's what dogs do. Why? because they instinctively know they want to get this microbiome from these things. And it tastes good. Why does it taste good? Because evolution has designed them to like that taste. Now, in our case, evolution has designed us to say, I'm not too sure about that. Reason for that, because we are actually a bit different. Our immune system is not designed exactly the same as the dogs. We're actually very similar because we do share a microbiome, but we are not quite the same. But having said that, let me, for example, give one quick human example. There are some humans that eat poo, and they are the Inuits, but only in their native form when they eat reindeer poo as a source of fiber.
Interesting.
That's when they're eating their traditional diet. And when you switch the Inuit people to the Western diet, they die quickly of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and all those terrible things. But on their high fat, high protein, reindeer poo diet, they live really healthy lives. They're probably in ketogenesis most of their life.
Yeah, that's incredible. Oh man, we could go on for a long time, Dr. B. I just have endless questions.
I've over-talked, and I haven't allowed you to talk.
You know what though? Your wealth of knowledge, I want to learn from you, and the things you've shared here today, I'm so excited to share with my community as well, because they've heard me talk enough, right? And even on your Gussy Guts page, like the stuff you shared today, it reminds me of marketing in general, where the end user or viewer has to see something 7 times in a like back to back to back in order for it to really stick. And the way that you communicate and the way that you almost tell stories, it's fascinating. So I think this is extremely valuable. I love this.
Well, look, thank you for the opportunity to do it, because a lot of this stuff has been bubbling away in me for years, and I've been watching all this stuff happen on the internet. And I think somebody has to change this.
Yeah, they do. They do, and that's going to be you. So no, I think this is a good spot.
It's going to be you, as you now tell your people whatever truths that you learn, because they're going to listen to you. They don't listen to an old fogey, but they'll listen to you.
I think you have more influence than you realize. So, and I'll have to have you on my page as well, come on to like my Instagram or something. And I think that'll be a fun time, if you'd be open to it. Because I think, a lot of the people that follow me are, I would say 95% of them are raw curious. Like they want to, and they see the value, but they're scared. And so they follow me for 6 to 8 months, get confident, and then start adding some at least fresh foods, if not some raw foods, to their dog's bowl. So it's pretty fun and exciting to watch them grow with me.
Well, and having said that, let me make one little comment. Okay. This idea of adding chopped up vegetables to you as a topper, as somehow enhancing your dog's diet, useless.
Really?
Dogs can't digest those big lumps of vegetables.
Right. As long as it's cooked, you mean, then, or no, pureed,
as long as it's crushed.
Or crushed.
Vegetables only become valuable when they become like the gut contents of an animal. And you have to think about, again, biology. What happens? The herbivore eats the grass, it goes down into its rumen, and then it brings it up again and chewed and chewed and chewed until it's totally crushed. That releases the cell wall, the cellulose, that could then becomes available as a prebiotic to the dog that might consume that, say tripe or the gut contents of an animal when it eats the animal. And so it's got the cellulose as a prebiotic. It's got the actual organisms that are on the food, probiotic, and it's got all the insides of each cell, the plant cell, the vitamins, the enzymes, the minerals, the fats. All of those are suddenly released and become available. But in large chunks, they're just mostly going to go through undigested. Yes. And they might make the dog happy at the time of eating it, if some dogs like that. But they're not doing any great nutritional value. So again, you have to look at the biological situation and say, what is our dog designed to eat? He's designed to eat gut contents and poo, along with a few other things. He's a scavenger.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
incredible,
Dr. B.
Can you guys hear me by chance?
We just can't
see you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really sorry I couldn't be on. I have been listening, and I just love the entire conversation. And Rachel, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great. I hope your audience enjoys this talk too.
Absolutely. It's been my honor and really, really excited about it. So thank you guys again for having me.
Well, thank you for chatting. It's lovely talking to you.
You as well.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today and watching on replay. And please see Rachel. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but you can find her at her name, rachelfusaro.com, and also on her social media at the same handle, Rachel Fusaro, one word, of course. Thanks so much, Rachel. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Do I click out, Rob?
You can click out. I'm just trying to end. Yeah, I'm just trying to end. You can click right out. Thank you.
Okay,
It's just
cool. No
taking
worries. Thank
forever
you.
to end this
Technology.
broadcast. Sorry.